And people can really struggle with that when you're in sort of checkmate mode. One of the people who doesn't struggle with that is Wesley So, as he jumps ahead by a point.
He's able to find those checkmates. And for Jeffrey, he spent his whole opening stopping b5 and d5, as we were talking about, and then it happened, and he did not react in the best way. And it could be because you just assumed it wasn't possible, but you can make no assumptions in chess. You have to always calculate. And we get a King's Indian down there, so you should be happy.
Wait, but Robert, why couldn't White just capture the pawn on e5 twice? Is there some hidden theory that I'm not aware of?
Probably. I'm not going to tell you what exactly it is, but there's something
right. It's
here.
Somewhere hiding beneath the surface. I'm okay. Fine. No comment. And now they get this reverse King's Indian attack position, which I've never been a fan of from White's perspective. I feel like Black has this very easy plan of going bishop f5 and then getting the b8 knight, eventually sometimes to g5 via f8 and h7. Mark Dvoretsky was a big fan of this type of position for Black. He wrote a long article about it that kind of influenced my views.
Yes, well, not all of Dvoretsky's work was in the endgame manual, but that's, I think, what people best know him by. And here comes the knight to f8. It's sort of a known plan for Black. And you mentioned it. The knight from b8 doesn't really have any good initial options. So you spend 1, 2, 3, 4 turns hopping that knight around. And then you get to g5 where it helps in the attack. And especially if White ever plays h3, there will be sacrifices in the air. And he goes through e6 in this particular variation because the e4 pawn is under no threat.
Yeah, Black's position is so rich with tactical ideas. I was just going to say bishop h6 creates the threat of knight takes d4. And Wesley, alert, reacts with knight d5. Now, this is not to say that White doesn't have his share of ideas. If Black falls asleep on the king side, you can already see that Wesley has developed quite the queenside pressure. It's got a pawn on b5. If the c file opens, then that pawn on c7 is going to be a sitting duck. And I think chess history buffs in the chat might remember the Fischer-Miyagmar-Seward game, which was this type of position with colors reversed. And in that game, Bobby just, it was a crushing game. It was one of the more famous, probably one of the most famous games of all time. But in modern chess, these kinds of games among grandmasters, Robert, are very rare because everybody knows the typical plans and nobody just waits around for their opponent to checkmate them. I mean, it's always more complicated than that.
And checkmate on the queen side isn't quite as scary, but here it's actually a menacing ideas with the c7 pawn. The b takes a6 anymore, b6 can be played. And actually, if White had a free move, let's say Black played rook c8 or something random, trading on f6 followed by d5 just simply wins a piece.
Yeah, it's a threat.
So
it's a threat, and it's not clear how to deal with it. He drops it back to g7.
Yeah, bishop back to g7. So doesn't blunder a piece, protects the f6 knight with the bishop, but Don, it's typically a bad sign when you went bishop g7 to h6 to get active, and then your next move is bishop back to g7.
It is, but at the same time, I'm not sure exactly how Wesley continues his queenside pressure. Maybe a neutral move, like, I don't know, rook c2 and start doubling. But Black is pretty close to also playing, knight g4, knight g5. So I'm not too concerned about Black's position just yet. Wesley going h3.
I don't like that move because we've been talking about knight g5, and now you're giving that knight a square to sacrifice on, or the bishop is sacrificed there. So perhaps objectively it's a good move, and it gives the king some love for the future. But I look at that pawn, and I immediately want to sacrifice on that square.
Right. And knight g5 basically prepares that sacrifice. Now, the engine is not very good at evaluating these positions, so I wouldn't put too much stock in the eval, but there's knight g5 immediately. Could Wesley go b6 here? Try to stick a knight on c7?
Is this type of position where you could just give up an exchange and then go checkmate the enemy king, right?
Oh, it's you give up the entire queen side.
The rooks are not playing their part, at least not yet, and that's why Wesley went knight back to f4, and then Jeffrey's done this now twice. He went bishop h6, bishop g7.
Yeah, knight
then he
back
went
to e6.
Knight e6 to g5, back to e6, and he's just trying to trade off White's best defenders in a way that leaves his position with some good chances. And queen c2.
Okay.
Does that even go after the e4 pawn?
It's a slightly weird move because I don't think Jeffrey was really threatening to take on b5. I mean, White would have no problem with queen takes b5. So this was the idea. He was preparing c5.
And if you had d5, I guess c6
There's
is
c6. Yeah. I mean, if black gets just 2 moves, right? D5 and C6, the attack is completely shut down. Everything relies on tempo for tempo play here. Now bishop C4 looks tempting. C6 anyway. I could totally see this going either way. Now he takes on D6, opening up the C file instead. Can black get that queen to G5 or to H4?
Right, you wanted your queen over there. Sometimes you can play queen takes D6 in these positions, but I don't think here. White's so fast over on the queen side. And a queen trade leaves black just crushed, right? If the queen just disappear, black is going to lose because now you've no checkmate ideas and white is still crashing through on the queen side.
Right, just like in any position where you're attacking on the king side, such as the king's Indian, endgames are often terrible because the queen side attack remains even in the event that the queens are traded, but there's really no king side potential in the absence of a queen. Okay, CD, CD.
Yeah, Jeffrey still wants to bring that queen out to those king side scores, like you said.
I think Wesley has to continue playing with tempo. Maybe queen B3, bishop C4, because you give black one more move and you have to start dealing with sacrifices like knight takes C3 and bishop takes H3. There it is.
Yes. And that was a very important move. And by the way, Daniel, in some positions with that queen on C2, like knight F4 was a possibility because the queen on C2 is going to be stared at by bishop on F5. So queen B3, it's a multi-purpose move. It protects E3, attacks D5, and just avoids any of those possibilities from black's perspective.
That's right. That's takes the air out of the building, forces black's knight back. And it just feels like Wesley's starting to get the upper hand here. B6 and back to E6 again.
Has it been there enough times today?
Nah, I think it needs to go back and forth at least one more time.
And it might go to G5 next. You say back and forth.
Right.
It would like to go there, but that allows rook C7, and now the B7 pawn is under attack. So Wesley's trying to crash
fearless.
Knight C4, bishop A3, and look at Jeffrey. He gives up D6 to go and try to sack a piece over here on the king side. But after queen takes D6, the queen can go back to G3. So
yeah, the eval bar is not having it. I like queen takes D6. I think probably you can get away with queen takes B7, objectively speaking, but you don't want to mess with that kind of stuff in a blitz game.
No, because a knight G5, and it just looks scary. Yeah. Even though it might just be winning for white, and probably is, I could see that going black's way any moment. Although your queen gets trapped in some of these positions. There's some really cool lines. Like here, queen B7, knight G5, like queen D5 back, you go bishop H3. Doesn't G3 just trap the queen?
That's an incredible resource, actually.
It's pretty funny.
And
but
Wesley
the queen is in trouble.
He plays with an abundance of caution here. Bishop F1, which I'm surprised he didn't take on D6, Robert. I felt like that was a watertight idea, just to get that queen back, and feel like white's winning there. I feel like probably white is winning here as well. Wait a second. Still have those ideas.
So it's rook C7, bring another piece into the attack. B7, now F7, so the knight has to stay on G5.
Exactly. That really, really hurts black. Rook A to D8.
G3?
G3.
Yeah, because you have to take with the knight on H3, and then take your knight and
bishop takes H3.
Yeah, and queen F7 is made. So G3 traps the queen.
Yeah, and wins the game on the spot.
Oh, and he misses it.
Wesley misses it. Rook A to C1. Now the deflating thing for black is that bishop E5. What a move!
No
and
G3
Jeffrey
for
senses
you.
it. He knows that G3 is a threat, and so he stops it in any way that he can.
And if you trade, then the knight on D2 is loose, and then the queen will attack the F2 pawn.
I'm shocked Wesley missed G3 though.
And there's some amazing checkmates there too. Like some really cool, takes like queen, I don't know, B7, rook D2, and you go G3. Then queen takes G3 check.
Queen takes G3.
And knight F3.
Arabian mate.
Oh my gosh.
Checkmates this is incredible. And guess what? Wesley's not really seeing a move. He's now down under a minute. Shockingly, he missed this G3 move, which would have won on the spot. Now he's given Jeffrey a new lease on life. Bishop E5 is brilliant.
There's so many threats. Bishop H3, perhaps. Yeah. Even Bishop H2 check
H2
is not to be overlooked because queen takes F2, and the king is going to be in grave danger. And it says
Jeffrey's
plus
turn this game around.
+5. I don't see why. I mean, you might be able to take some material, and he does take the bishop.
Take it. Those mating patterns. Queen takes. Oh my goodness! He wants the bishop on G3.
Okay, but
what an insane move!
But can you take? Oh, you back rank made it. I'm like, can you take? You cannot take on D2 after. because rook c8 check.
Rook c8 and not bishop g. I thought the reason was bishop g3, but it's not even that. It's much more convincing than that.
It's mate back here. So even though you take this rook here, after king h7, rook h8 would be check and mate. So back to the
what a beautiful move.
And what is he thinking about here? He might be
able to take the queen.
He could be throwing it some kind of knight check. He takes the queen first, then knight takes h3.
Now rook takes d2 because you've got rook d8.
Oh, that's huge.
That is huge. Now
black
H4
is definitely better.
Coming.
H4 in the f2 pawn.
H4 is coming. Bishop
queen
f4,
b2.
there's g5. King h7. Okay, goes king g7. You got to be careful not to allow bishop b5.
b7.
Rook g8 check is coming, followed by b8 equals queen.
Wow. And so
and now the bishop can move.
Rook e8. Ah, but then you take the bishop.
Takes f4. What's the move here? I guess you can move the bishop, but then black's bishop moves away and f2 is going to be hanging.
Yeah, you have to be very careful. And 6 seconds for Wesley.
Bishop h2. Now bishop takes h3.
There it goes.
Oh, my lands.
Rook takes e2.
Rook takes e2. Rook g8. King h7.
King h7.
But then rook h8.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, you can even take the rook.
King
you
h7,
can take the
king
rook
g6.
and go king h7.
Can your king just run? Oh, wow. It's that simple?
I think this is perfectly good enough. Black's king is safe. Queen is coming to f3 after rook f1. And Wesley resigns.
Bishop e5 was the it could be a match changer, but that was certainly the game changer.
It absolutely was. That was insane. Wesley missing that opportunity to win on the spot with g3. And people like Jeffrey, they don't give you more than one chance.